Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Ainan's Forensic Classroom. So today we have finally reached the seventh and final S of the crime scene investigation, which is secure the evidence. Now, before we talk about collection, packaging, or preservation, there's one rule I want you to remember throughout this entire video. In fact, if you remember only one thing from today's lesson, let it be this: photograph and document the evidence before you touch it. Now, no matter how important the evidence looks, no matter how experienced the investigator is, first photograph it, record its location, and document it properly. Only then should it be collected. Now, let's look at the rules of evidence collection. Now, before we start collecting different types of evidence, there are a few rules that apply to every single item at a crime scene. And trust me, these rules are not optional. One small mistake can contaminate your evidence, it can damage it, or make the results difficult to interpret later. The first one is always wear gloves and change them between items. Now, this is one of the most important rules in forensic science. Now, imagine collecting a blood-stained shirt, right? And then you pick up a drinking glass which has fingerprints, and you collect it with the same gloves. Now, you have just transferred the biological material from one item to another. That is called as cross-contamination, and it can create serious problems during analysis. So remember, if you have a new item, you should always wear new gloves. Then second one is use the right collection tool for the right evidence. For example, forceps, swabs, paper bags, rigid containers. Now each of these has a specific purpose. The wrong tool can damage the evidence or reduce its value for the laboratory examination. Third is avoid talking, coughing, or sneezing over the exposed evidence. Now, it looks like a small thing, but your saliva droplets contain DNA. Now, if these droplets land onto the evidence, you may end up adding your own DNA to the sample. And finally, collect thoroughly. If multiple fibers are present, collect everything. If a stain can be sampled from different areas, please collect multiple samples whenever appropriate. Because once the scene is released, investigators usually do not get a second chance to come back and collect more. Now let's talk about the collection and packaging by evidence types. Now different types of evidence require completely different collection approach. Now what works for a firearm will destroy a blood sample, or what works for a document will contaminate a fingerprint. Now let's go through the main categories one by one. The first one is the biological evidence. Let's start with the biological evidences like blood, saliva, or hair, etc. Now, this is one of the most sensitive evidence at a crime scene because these evidences contain DNA, and DNA can degrade if it is not collected and preserved properly. Now, for wet blood samples, DNA investigators use a sterile cotton swab and they collect the sample using a gentle rolling motion. Now, the swab must then be allowed to air dry completely before packaging. And for the dried blood stain, you will have a slightly moistened swab which is used first, and then it is followed by a dry swab to collect any remaining material. Now, both of those swabs are packaged together. For hair, forceps should be used instead of fingers, and if hair has a root attached, that's even better because the root contains nuclear DNA, which is highly valuable for identification. Now, here's the rule I want you to remember for biological evidence is never package your evidences in plastic. Never, because plastic traps moisture and moisture encourages bacterial growth, and bacteria can damage DNA. That's why biological evidence is typically packaged in paper containers, which allows the sample to breathe and stay dry. Then we will talk about the firearms and ammunition. Now, this is one of the first rules that investigators have to learn, which is every firearm should be always treated as loaded until it is proven otherwise. Now, safety always comes first, but a firearm is also one of the most valuable pieces of evidence at a crime scene. It may contain fingerprints, touch DNA, gunshot residue, microscopic markings that can link it to a particular bullet. That's why investigators have to be extremely careful when handling it. Now, a firearm should never be handled by a barrel or trigger guard. Okay, do not ever handle it using the barrel or trigger guard. Instead, what you can do is handle it by this textured grip in order to reduce the risk of damaging fingerprints or the other evidence. Now, shell casings and bullets also need careful handling. They are collected using the forceps rather than bare hands, and they have to be separated. They have to be packaged separately because each casing and bullet may contain unique microscopic markings, and investigators don't want those markings scratched or damaged by contact with the other items. Then we have trace evidence. Now, this is one of the most overlooked but powerful type of evidence in forensics. When people think of evidence, they usually imagine fingerprints, blood stains, or weapons. But sometimes a single fiber or a tiny paint chip or a fragment of glass or small amount of soil can provide the link investigators need. The challenge is that trace evidence is incredibly small. It is easy to miss, it is easy to contaminate, and easy to lose if it isn't collected properly. Now, depending on the type of material, investigators may use forceps, they may use tape lifts, or any other specialized collection methods. Now, fibers and hair are often collected using this paper fold, which we also call as a druggist fold. Now, then we have glass fragments. They are packaged in rigid containers in order to prevent the breakage. And then we have soil samples, which are collected in clean containers for laboratory analysis. And here's the most important rule when dealing with evidence, trace evidence. Never mix your samples from different locations. Now, if you have a fiber that is found in the living room and you have a fiber that is found in a bedroom, these are two separate pieces of evidence and it should be packaged separately. Once samples are mixed, investigators may lose valuable information about where that evidence originally came from. And then we have digital evidence. Now let's talk about the digital evidences such as mobile phones, laptops, computers, hard drives, and other electronic devices. Now, unlike most other evidences, digital evidence can change the moment you interact with it. Okay. Now, if you press a button or if you connect a charger, or if you turn on the device, and you may alter the important data. In some cases, you could even trigger security features or allow the data to be deleted remotely. And that's why investigators follow a very simple rule, which is do not interact with your device unless you are trained and authorized to do so. Instead, the device have to be photographed exactly as it was found. Now, investigators document important details such as the make, model, serial number, uh, and whether the screen is on or off. If anything is visible on the screen, that is documented as well. The device is then secured, and whenever appropriate, it is placed in this bag, which is called as a Faraday bag. Now, the Faraday bag basically blocks the wireless signals. It helps prevent remote access, remote wiping, and other unwanted communication with the device. Now, once packaged and labeled, the device is sent to the digital forensics laboratory where specialists carry out the examination. Now, before we end, there's one final thing to remember about packaging evidence. The goal of packaging is not simply to store the evidence, it is to protect it, right? The container must prevent contamination, prevent loss of material, and preserve the evidence in the same condition in which it was before. Then every single evidence package, regardless of what is inside, it has to be labeled before it leaves the crime scene. Now the label must include case number, the evidence item number, which should match the evidence log, a description of the contents, or the exact location where it was found, date and time of the collection, and name and signature of the collector. Now think of the label as the evidence's ID card. Without it, investigators may not be able to prove exactly what the item is, where it came from, or who handled it. That's why evidence is not considered fully secured until it has been collected, packaged, and labeled correctly. And that's it for video 1 of Secure the Evidence. In the next video, we will follow the evidence after it leaves the crime scene. We'll see how it is preserved, how it is stored, and what happens when that evidence eventually makes its way into a courtroom. So if you enjoyed this video, then please hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends, because that's honestly the goal of this channel, to make forensic science feel less scary and a lot more understandable. I'll see you in the next video. Till then, take care. Bye bye.